Hi, I'm the Moss Man, and in today's video we'll be discussing how to properly water your plant. To start off though, we need to know what is overwatering and what is underwatering. These terms seem kind of self-explanatory, but actually overwatering your plants is more common than you might think. So let's discuss that. Now when you're talking about levels of watering, these two plants, I believe, are on polar opposite ends of the spectrum. Cacti and succulents and those kinds of things, you'd figure would like to stay drier, and they do like their soil more consistently dry. And this maidenhair fern here, it's almost impossible to overwater this plant. The soil for this cactus is pretty dry on the top, and the soil for this maidenhair here, if you looked in there, it's pretty damp right now. But I'd say they're both about the same stage in the watering process. The actual issue with overwatering, like the problem that comes from watering your plants too much, is usually, or I believe mostly, root rot. So this cactus, for example, if the water is if the soil is always damp, then the roots inside there are going to be damp, so they're going to grow bacteria and they're going to grow rot. And that rot is going to kill the roots, and in some cases it'll climb up through the cactus and just melt it away. It's awful. And a really big issue, like I said, especially with cacti and succulents. So you really don't want to overwater these kinds of plants. So that leads me to my second point, which is underwatering. So these two plants here are both plants that have not received enough water. Something you'll notice that's common between them is they both have these kind of like burnt ends on the leaves. They both look pretty yellow in some places. This crispy stuff is the flowers from this plant. But the common denominator is, yes, these plants have not received enough water. This one is actually pretty stringy, probably from receiving a little too much water at one point. But yeah, so it's all about balance, right? These plants have been a little bit neglected, so they're going to grow yellowy and burn the edges and whatnot. And the soil is dry on top, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but if you can stick your finger, say about to 2 knuckles down, and it's bone dry at the bottom still, you probably should water your plant. Another handy tool for checking your plant moisture is this moisture meter thing, which I think you can find at most nurseries, probably like Walmart, or basically anywhere that sells plants will probably have a moisture meter or something of that variety, which then you can stick even deeper than you can put your finger down, and I can tell that this is reading pretty darn dry, even all the way down to the bottom of this container. Now, you don't want to do that in just one spot because the soil can dry unevenly, or perhaps you've watered unevenly. So you want to put it in a variety of spots. See, that one's reading slightly more moist, but it's still dry. So now that we have these dry plants, or this one specifically is the drier of the two, how do you water it properly? Which is clearly the overall point of this video, is how to properly water your plants. So we know we don't want to overwater it, and we don't want to underwater it. So how do you properly water it? So, perhaps you've determined that your plant is now in need of watering. Now, we've assessed that through multiple methods. We can stick our finger down to the second knuckle and it's dry all the way down. The leaves are brown and getting burnt edges. We used our measurement or device, and it showed us that the soil was dry all the way down. This is how you properly water. You don't need a watering can, but most people have some sort of way to water like this, and you soak it. The soil will be hydrophobic, when it's dry like this, usually. And if you don't know what that means, I'll break down the word for you. Hydro, which is like water, and phobic, which people usually think phobia, scared of, aversion to, those kinds of things. So hydrophobic means that the soil is not going to absorb the water very well. So to actually get that water deep in the soil, you want to soak it. You want to get that water, as much water in there as you can. And ideally, you'll see that water starts coming out the bottom of your container, as it is here. That's another reason why I think it's important to have at least a drip tray or saucer or whatever, or have it double potted, so like a pot inside a nice looking pot. And the other thing with watering is you want to get all of the soil. And when you're watering, you want to water the soil and not the plant. So you get the tip of your watering can, or you get your glass where the soil is, so you can actually water it properly. Now, considering that we've talked about overwatering, and you're going, oh, well, don't you want to not overwater it? If there's so much water in here, isn't it going to get root rot? Well, that's the thing. In certain situations, it's very difficult to overwater. The main thing that you want is drainage. You want to be able to soak your plant, and you want it to be able to drain. And you want to keep repeating this process of letting it get dry, but not too dry, soaking it and letting it get dry, but not too dry, and then soaking it. And the key to not overwatering your plant is having good drainage in your pot, having an area for that water to go to get out of the soil. There's a few different issues with the way that some people water. Like if you water on a schedule, you water, say, once every Friday, you go through and water all your plants. But with watering, you drink when you're thirsty, right? So you water your plants when they need water. You don't water them every Friday at 5. You water them when you can stick your finger in and you can tell that it's dry, and you go, oh, okay, this plant needs water. Or perhaps the leaves are starting to droop, and you can look at the soil and you go, okay, this plant needs water. And what ends up happening if you're always just like watering it on a schedule, or you're watering it every time the top of the soil starts to get slightly dry, what you're doing is you're actually helping the rot get a hold of your plant easier. You're keeping the soil more moist than it needs to be, and depending on how you're watering it, you could not be getting the water down to the actual roots of the plant, so your plant doesn't actually get the water that it needs, and it could be drying out even though you're watering it every week and the top of the soil is always super moist. The actual roots of the plant aren't getting any of the water, and you're just rotting the top of the plant. So it's really important when you water it thoroughly, but only water your plant when it needs it. Alright, so hopefully you've learned a thing or two. Yeah, this has been one of a few different videos that I'll be making on the basics of plant. I've made one on light and CO2 so far. There should be one coming on fertilizer at some point, or if you're watching this in the future, I've made one already, so I'll link to that playlist right here. I don't know which side it'll be on, but it'll be there somewhere. And as is customary, I would like to thank Dylan Elijah for providing all the music in this video. And yeah, if you enjoyed, leave a like, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.